Good day everyone, I am Rina Batobalani. Today I will be discussing the explanatory sequential max method designs, which is one of the most commonly used designs in max methods research. This approach is important because it allows researchers to not only gather numerical data but also understand the deeper meaning behind those results. So what is explanatory sequential max method design? So, explanatory sequential max method design, it is a two-phase research design where the researcher first collects and analyzes the quantitative data, then follows it with qualitative data collection to explain or elaborate on the result. In simple terms, the researcher starts with numbers such as surveys, statistical data results, and then uses interviews or discussion to better understand what those numbers actually mean. So next, we have the purpose of explanatory sequential max method. So the main purpose of this design is to provide a clearer explanation of quantitative findings. Sometimes, numbers alone cannot fully explain a situation or what is the findings. For example, you may know what is happening based on data but not why it is happening. So this design is especially useful when the results are unexpected. The data shows interesting patterns or when the researcher wants to explore the reason behind the results. By adding qualitative data, the researcher can gain deeper insights and provide more meaningful conclusions. So next, we have the process. It is the step-by-step explanation how explanatory sequential max method works or how it is used. The explanatory sequential design follows a clear and structured process. First is the quantitative phase. In this stage, the researcher collects numerical data using tools such as surveys, questionnaires, or experiments. After collecting the data, it is analyzed using statistical methods to identify patterns, relationships, or trends. Next is the qualitative phase. Based on the result from the first phase, the researcher then conducts interviews, focus groups, or observations. These steps is important because it helps explain the results obtained from the quantitative data. So basically, the process flows like this. The researcher collects numbers first, analyzes them, and then gathers detailed explanation to support or clarify those results. So we have here the key features of explanatory sequential max method. One of the most important features of this design is that the qualitative phase is directly based on quantitative result. This means that the findings from the first phase guide the second phase. This connection between two phases makes the research more focused and meaningful. For example, a researcher may conduct a survey to measure students' academic performance in English. After analyzing the results, the researcher might find that many students have low scores in writing. However, the survey alone cannot explain the reason behind this. So, in the second phase, the researcher interviews selected students to ask questions about their study habits, difficulties, or learning environment. Through this, the researcher can understand whether the issue is due to lack of practice, difficulties in grammar, or other factors. So next, we have here the advantages and the challenges of explanatory sequential max method. So what are the advantages of explanatory sequential max method? One of the advantages of this design is that it provides a clear and logical structure, making it easy to follow and understand. It also allows the researcher to combine numerical data and detailed explanation, which leads to a more complete and accurate understanding of the research problem. Additionally, it helps to improve the quality and credibility of the research findings because the results are supported by both data and explanation. However, this design also has some challenges. First, it is time-consuming because the researcher needs to complete 2 phases of data collection and analysis. Second, it requires a careful planning, especially in deciding on which results from the quantitative phase need to further explanation or need further explanation. Lastly, it can be challenging to connect the two types of data properly because quantitative and qualitative data are very different in nature. In conclusion, the explanatory sequential max method design is a powerful approach that helps researchers to go beyond numbers and truly understand their findings. By combining quantitative and qualitative methods, researchers can not only identify trends but also explain the reason behind them, leading to a more meaningful and reliable conclusion. So that's all my report. Thank you so much for listening and have a good day.